Welcome to day 38 of the Kunnin Orruk's journey to the Atlantic City Open in Atlantic City, New Jersey. In my last video, I was priming the Savage Orcs with Vallejo Surface Primer and getting them ready for initial grayscale values and beginning color work on the orc flesh. You might recall when I was painting a Wasgob, I have a particular opinion when it comes to orc flesh. I don't want the skin to be too blue in its green. As you know, green is comprised of primary colors, two primary colors in fact, blue and yellow. And sometimes when you go more of one or the other, it can definitely change the quality of the green. And orc flesh straight from the pot or the dropper tends to definitely lean towards the blue primary than the yellow primary. When I was painting up Wasgob, I did a lot of effort, and now looking at my work with the Savage Orcs, probably some unnecessary effort, and really pulling off a more yellow, warmer green for Wasgob's skin. With these Savage Orcs, I think I've achieved something very similar, though a different color, and I'm very happy with what I've been learning through this process. In my first video, I talked about applying the surface primer by hand with a brush because I believed it helped me control the amount of paint on the model and prevent myself from unintentionally obscuring the details that are in the plastic. And after applying some grayscales by hand with dry brushing and then getting some more highlights with some white, again by dry brushing, I think we're going to swear off rattle cans wholesale, which is shocking. I'm a big proponent of rattle cans. I think they're very easy, and they're also very easy to overspray with. I think I have too much of a heavy hand. Wind conditions in Chicago can be variable, even with a spray tent and accounting for various things. I just lack the control that one might find with an airbrush. And I think that airbrush is integral if you want to make sure that you're not obscuring details while still having kind of a quick primer, rattle can style approach. Honestly though, dry brushing by hand I find very rewarding in getting the initial tonal values on the model. I've referred to this in the past as the slap chop technique because that's what Rob at the Honest Wargamer has called it. And really this is just value sketching on top of a model. When I first did this on the Gits, I used a 50-50 gray. When I say 50-50, 50% black, 50% white, and it's a very middle gray. The problem with the Vallejo primer though is that it's so rich in its blackness that applying a 50-50 gray, after drying, the gray is dark. And I would say it's more of like an 80% gray than a 50-50 gray. So with the Savage Orcs, to compensate for this, I went with an ash gray, which I would say is like more like a 40-30% gray. And I even actually applied this in two different layers. The first layer, very similarly, the gray after it had dried had been absorbed mostly by the surface primer black and was a little bit darker than what I wanted. So to make sure that I had a nice transition between the deepest recesses of the model and the flatter surfaces that I wanted to be gray, I gave it another pass with the dry brush with that ash gray. And of course, I finished it off with picking out the highest points of the model, imitating the sun by only looking at kind of like the top surfaces or where light should touch the model, and hitting that with a white dry brush. Just in its black and white form, the models look pretty excellent. I joked in the Discord that I should sell these as stone splitters, and when I say sell, pass them off in tournament as 3 colors. I'm not going to do that. But the result was very good. I think the character of each of the models comes out very clearly. You see all these excellent details, and I was seeing beady little eyes on the models that I haven't seen before, and I've been staring at orcs for a few years now. So I'm very pleased with learning that I can achieve a thin and accurate tonal variation using just my brushes. Surface primer, do some dry brush work, and overall it did take a little bit longer, but to be fair, I use extended dry times when I was using a rattle cam, so it's about even. I want to say it took me about 3 hours from having the models already primed in black to bringing up the value from gray, another layer of gray, to white. So let's talk about the colors. Duncan Rhodes made an excellent Games Workshop tutorial on Orc Flesh, and he approached it with olive drab kind of in mind, very similar to Army Fatigues. And in this tutorial, he pulls off an excellent result. And really the warmth in a green and that earthiness that I'm looking for this army. I don't have Citadel color line. I have a couple of pots, a few of the washes are good, a number of their technical paints I like. Tesseract Glow, for example, is fairly excellent, but I'm a cheap guy. I have the Army Painter line, that's what I started out with. I want to continue using the Army Painter line because I feel that it's a great learning paint. I might advance to a different paint line in the future, but for now, I'm an Army Painter guy. Luckily, Army Painter has an excellent color conversion chart on their website, so you're able to pretty closely match your Citadel colors to your Army Painter droppers. So Duncan started off with a Deathworld Forest, which is an army green in Army Painter. I picked up a bottle of that and I decided to use it as a glaze. So I mixed it with the Vallejo glaze medium and applied that on top of the tonal shading that I had dry brushed previously on the model. And I couldn't have been more happy with the result. The glaze went on thinly enough that it was able to still retain all of the dry brush work that I did underneath it. And I was able to start getting this nice olive tone onto the Savage Orcs. From there, Duncan uses Beltane Green, which is a green shade that GW makes. And that was a little bit trickier to come across because while I had Camo Shade from GW, that isn't quite green. I would say it's more brown, like a muddied, very brown, muddied green. And that wasn't quite the effect that Duncan had, and he was using the green to kind of really get into those recesses and, tie them all together with the shade. I do, however, have the Army Painter Speed Paint line, and through some experimenting, the Camo Cloak Army Painter Speed Paint is very close to the Beltane Green. So I thinned that out. In the tutorial, Duncan thins out the shade with water. Army Painter Speed Paint doesn't necessarily work with water too well, but the Army Painter did include the Speed Paint Medium in order to dilute the speed paints. So I applied 50% speed paint medium with the Camo Cloak speed paint and applied the wash all over. The end result is what we have today, and there is a rich earthy green on the models. I think this is an excellent base, and I'll be building up from there. The next color is going to be Elysian Green, which is going to be Commando Green on the Army Painter side. I don't have Camo Green or Commando Green with me, so I put that on order, and I should get that Tuesday, and that'll allow me to continue working on this group of Savage Orcs. I'm very stoked with how they're coming out so far. And while I'm waiting for Commando Green to come in, I'm going to get the other 10 orcs that I've already built, primed, and start getting those ready for the same process that I'm going through. So starting tomorrow, I have 2 weeks before I have some time off, which will be entirely dedicated a week's worth of time towards hobbying. And that week we'll be heading into the local tournament at the Dice Dojo, which will be playing at 2,000 points. And that's going to be a great primer for the Atlantic City Open, which will follow 2 weeks after that event. I have a lot of work to do, but I think I can do it, and spending an hour at least each day this week really drove home that as long as you're making consistent effort and progress towards your hobby, you're going to get where you need to be. Now, quality-wise, realistically, I think I'm going to get most of these models table ready from a painting standpoint. I don't think we're going to win any awards just yet, but I also don't think I'm going to get docked severely point-wise. And that's good enough for me, I think, for right now. At the very least, the models are going to be taken as far as they can given time, and they'll be in a great spot to continue work as the weeks progress into summer. I think by the time the US Open in Chicago happens in October, I'm going to have a pretty awesome looking army. I'll be following up with updates likely after Tuesday when I have that Commando Green in, and I look forward to updating you all on my progress then.